The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was built for giants. Its ceiling rose so high that clouds formed near the top, drifting under lights that looked like small suns. Thousands of alien delegates sat in rings of seats that circled a raised platform. Each ring belonged to a different species. Some delegates were tall and thin, with skin like blue glass. Others were short and wide, covered in thick gray plates. Some floated in tanks of gas, their bodies glowing faintly as they moved. In the center of it all stood a single human woman. Her name was Ambassador Elena Cho. She wore a plain gray suit, nothing fancy, nothing that matched the jeweled robes and glowing armor of the beings around her. She stood with her hands folded in front of her, calm, though her heart was pounding. Humanity had only known about the wider galaxy for 11 years. 11 years since the first alien ship had entered Earth's solar system, a scout vessel that had been quickly destroyed by human missile defense before anyone understood what it was. That single act, done in fear and confusion, had changed everything. The galaxy had noticed Earth, and now Earth had been summoned here, to the heart of the Galactic Council, to answer for what the aliens called unprovoked aggression against a peaceful exploration vessel. Elena knew the truth was more complicated. She knew humanity had been given no warning, no first contact, nothing but a silent ship appearing in orbit with sensors sweeping over cities. She knew her people had reacted the only way they could, out of fear of the unknown. But she also knew that here, in this room, none of that mattered. What mattered was power, and humanity, by every measure the Council used, was weak. A being on the platform rose. It was the Speaker of the Council, a Dravith, a species known for their icy patience and their long memory for insults. The speaker was nearly 9 feet tall, with skin the color of dark stone and eyes that glowed pale yellow. Its voice, when it spoke, came out low and resonant, carried by translation devices to every corner of the hall. "Ambassador of Earth," the speaker said. "Your species has existed among the stars for 11 years. In that short time, you have destroyed one of our exploration vessels, ignored 3 formal requests for diplomatic contact, and refused to disarm your orbital defense platforms, as Council law requires of all new member species." Elena kept her voice steady. "We destroyed a vessel that gave no warning of its intentions, and approached our world without communication. We did not know it was an exploration vessel. We believed it was a threat." "Ignorance is not an excuse recognized by Council law," the speaker said. "New species are expected to demonstrate restraint and humility before they are granted full standing among civilized worlds. Instead, your species has shown aggression. Instead of humility, you have shown pride. You have built weapons. You have expanded your fleet. You have refused every attempt at guidance from species far older and wiser than your own." Murmurs rippled through the hall. Elena could feel thousands of alien eyes on her, some curious, some hostile, most simply indifferent, as if watching an insect struggle. "Humanity does not believe defending itself is aggression," Elena said. "We are willing to negotiate. We are willing to build peaceful relationships with every species in this room, but we will not disarm. We will not leave ourselves defenseless in a galaxy we barely understand, surrounded by species whose intentions we cannot yet know." The speaker's yellow eyes narrowed. "Then you refuse the Council's authority." "We refuse to be defenseless," Elena said. "That is different." A ripple of sound moved through the chamber, something between a hiss and a laugh. Many species here saw humanity as a curiosity, a young and foolish race that had not yet learned its place. Others, mostly the more militant species like the Dravith and their allies, saw humanity as a problem to be corrected before it grew into something dangerous. The speaker raised one long hand, and the murmuring stopped. "The Council has debated this matter for many cycles," the speaker said. "Some among us believe Earth should be given more time. Others believe your species is too unstable, too aggressive, too dangerous to be left unchecked. We have reached a decision." Elena's stomach tightened. She had expected pressure, threats, demands. She had not expected a decision had already been made before she even arrived. "Humanity will disarm its defense platforms within 30 solar cycles," the speaker said. "Your fleet will be reduced to ceremonial size only. Your weapons research will be frozen and inspected by Council overseers. And as a formal act of submission to Council authority, Your species will send a representative to kneel before this body, acknowledging that Earth accepts its place among the lesser worlds. The word kneel echoed through the chamber. Elena felt anger rise in her chest, hot and sudden, but she forced herself to stay calm. She had trained for years to represent her species here. She would not lose her composure now. Humanity will not kneel, she said. The chamber went silent. Even the strange floating creatures in their gas tanks seemed to still. The speaker leaned forward slightly. Then you invite consequences you do not yet understand, Ambassador. There are fleets in this galaxy that could erase your world in a matter of hours. Species that have fought wars across 100 star systems, wars your people cannot imagine. You are a single planet, a single species, untested, unproven, and very, very alone. We are not alone, Elena said quietly. We are simply new. New species do not survive by defiance, the speaker said. They survive by learning humility. Kneel, Ambassador, and the Council will show mercy. Refuse, and we will remind you why the galaxy fears the wrath of the old powers. Elena looked around the chamber. She saw curiosity in some eyes, pity in others, and cold calculation in the eyes of the Dravith and their allies. She understood, in that moment, that this was not truly about a destroyed scout ship. This was about control. The Council wanted to test humanity, to see if this new species would bend like so many others had before. I was sent here to negotiate peace, Elena said. I was not given authority to surrender the sovereignty of my planet. I cannot kneel on behalf of billions of people who have never agreed to such a thing. If you want humanity's submission, you will have to ask humanity itself, not a single ambassador standing alone in this room. The speaker's expression, as much as an alien face could show expression, twisted into something like anger. Then you refuse the Council's judgment. I am asking for time, Elena said. Time to bring this matter to my people. Time for real negotiation, not ultimatums. You have had 11 years, the speaker said. The Council's patience has limits, Ambassador. And today, you have tested them for the last time. The speaker turned to address the full chamber. Let it be recorded. The species of Earth has refused the lawful judgment of this Council. As is tradition, the matter will be settled by demonstration of consequence. A fleet will be dispatched to the Sol system to enforce compliance. Elena's blood went cold. You would attack a civilian world over a diplomatic disagreement? We would remind a young species of its place, the speaker said. Nothing more. If your world submits when the fleet arrives, no harm will come to it. If it resists, the consequences will be on your species alone. Guards, tall armored beings with weapons, Elena did not recognize, moved toward her. She did not resist as they escorted her from the platform, back through the ring of alien eyes, out of the great hall and into a transport that would take her back to the diplomatic quarters. Her mind raced. She needed to contact Earth immediately. She needed to warn them. 6 light-years away, in the orbit of a quiet star system far from the Council's usual patrol routes, a very different kind of meeting was taking place. Admiral James Okafor stood on the bridge of the TWS Resolute, humanity's newest and most advanced warship. The Resolute was not large by galactic standards. Compared to the massive Dravith battlecruisers or the ancient dreadnoughts of the Council's core species, it was almost small, but it carried something those older ships did not expect: human ingenuity, forged in less than a decade of desperate innovation, after first contact had shown humanity just how outmatched it truly was. Okafor had spent his entire career preparing for a moment like this. Ever since the first alien scout ship had been shot down over the Pacific, humanity's governments had set aside their old rivalries and poured every resource they had into a single goal: survival. Nations that had once been enemies became partners. Scientists who had once competed for prestige now shared their discoveries freely, racing against an unknown but almost certainly hostile galaxy. The results were not perfect. Human technology still lagged behind the oldest Council species in many ways, but humanity had one advantage that the ancient, comfortable powers of the galaxy did not expect. Desperation breeds speed. Humanity had learned faster than any species the Council had ever encountered. What took other species centuries to develop, humans had rushed to build in years, driven by fear, and by the simple, stubborn refusal to accept extinction as an option. "Admiral," said Lieutenant Sarah Voss, the ship's communications officer. "We're receiving an emergency transmission from Ambassador Cho. Priority 1. Okafor turned. "Put it through." Elena's voice came over the speakers, tense and urgent. "Admiral Okafor, the Council has refused negotiation. They are demanding humanity kneel, disarm, and accept full submission to their authority. When I refused, they declared they are sending a fleet to the Sol system to, in their words, remind us of our place." The bridge went quiet. Every officer turned to look at the Admiral. "How large a fleet?" Okafor asked. "Unknown," Elena said. "But Admiral, these are not small ships. The Dravith alone have technology far beyond anything we've built. If they decide to punish Earth, we may not be able to stop them." Okafor was silent for a long moment. He thought of Earth, of the cities he had sworn to protect, of the billions of people who had no idea just how close they now stood to disaster. He thought of the decade of sacrifice that had built the Resolute and her sister ships, of the scientists who had worked themselves to exhaustion, of the soldiers who had trained for a war none of them fully understood. "Ambassador," he said finally, "how long until that fleet reaches Earth?" "I don't know," Elena admitted. "Days, maybe hours, if they were already prepared to move." Okafor turned to his navigation officer. "Plot a course for Earth. Fastest safe route. Full burn." "Aye, Admiral," the officer replied, already moving to input coordinates. Okafor looked out at the stars through the bridge viewport, distant points of light scattered across the endless dark. Somewhere out there, an alien fleet was preparing to descend on his homeworld, expecting no real resistance, expecting a young and frightened species to surrender the moment real power appeared in its skies. They did not know humanity as well as they thought they did. "Send word to every Terran vessel in range," Okafor said. "All ships return to Sol system immediately. Full defensive posture. If the Council wants to test humanity's resolve, we will show them exactly what that resolve looks like." He turned to Lieutenant Voss. "Also send a message back to the Ambassador. Tell her humanity is not alone in this fight, and it never will be. Tell her the Resolute is coming home." As the ship's engines roared to life, propelling the Resolute toward Earth at speeds that would have astonished the ancient powers of the galaxy, Admiral Okafor allowed himself a small, grim smile. The Council had made its demand. Now humanity would give its answer. And that answer would not be a kneeling ambassador. It would be a warship and the will of an entire species standing behind it. News of the Council's ultimatum reached Earth within hours. Governments that had spent a decade quietly preparing for exactly this kind of moment moved fast. Emergency sessions were called in every capital. Military commanders activated defense protocols that had been drafted, rehearsed, and revised 100 times since first contact. Civilian populations were told only that a diplomatic dispute had occurred and that all citizens should remain calm while authorities managed the situation. Panic, the leaders agreed, would help no one. Behind closed doors, the mood was far less calm. In an underground command center beneath the Rocky Mountains, the leaders of Earth's newly unified Terran Defense Council gathered around a long table covered in holographic displays. Fleet positions blinked in red and blue. Estimated alien fleet strength, based on years of careful intelligence gathering, scrolled across one screen in grim numbers. "If the Dravith send even a fraction of their main battle fleet," said General Marcus Reyes, "we are looking at overwhelming force. Ship for ship, they outclass us in armor, in weapons range, in raw firepower." "Then we don't fight ship for ship," said Dr. Amara Singh, the head of Earth's Joint Weapons Research Program. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and little patience for despair. "We fight the way we've always fought when we're outmatched. We use what they don't expect." "And what exactly don't they expect, Doctor?" Reyes asked. Amara tapped a control, and a new display appeared, showing the schematics of Earth's newest weapons systems. Speed, adaptability, and weapons technology that doesn't follow their playbook. She explained. Over the past decade, human scientists had studied every scrap of alien technology recovered from the destroyed scout ship, and from careful, cautious trade negotiations with smaller, friendlier species who had quietly warned Earth about the dangers of the wider galaxy. Humanity had learned that most Council species relied on massive, heavily armored ships with powerful but slow-firing weapons, built for wars of attrition against enemies who fought the same way they did. Humans had taken a different path. Unable to match the raw size and armor of ships like the Dravith battlecruisers, Earth's engineers had focused instead on speed, precision, and unconventional tactics. The Resolute and her sister ships were smaller, faster, and packed with weapons designed to exploit weaknesses that centuries-old alien fleets had never needed to defend against, because no one had ever attacked them that way before. "They've been fighting the same kinds of wars for thousands of years," Amara said. "Big fleets, slow battles, predictable tactics. We've had exactly 1 decade to prepare for this, and we spent every day of it assuming we'd be outgunned. So we didn't try to outgun them. We tried to outthink them." General Reyes studied the schematics. "It's a gamble. Everything about surviving first contact has been a gamble," Amara said. "This is just the biggest one yet." Ambassador Elena Cho sat alone in the diplomatic quarters provided to her by the Council, a small suite of rooms in the massive space station that served as the seat of galactic government. She had not been allowed to leave since her refusal in the Great Hall. Guards stood outside her door, polite but firm, making it clear she was now something between a guest and a prisoner. A soft chime sounded, and the door slid open. A single alien entered, smaller than most of the delegates Elena had seen in the council hall, with pale green skin and large dark eyes. It was a Nemvari, one of the smaller, less powerful species in the council, known for their skill in diplomacy and their long history of trying to keep the peace between larger, more aggressive powers. "Ambassador Cho," the Nemvari said, its voice soft and careful. "I am Ketsara, an aide to the Council's diplomatic office. I wish to speak with you, unofficially." Elena studied the alien carefully. "Unofficially?" "Yes," Ketsara said. "What I say here will not be recorded, and I would ask that you not repeat it in any official setting. But I believe you deserve to understand what is truly happening." Elena gestured to a chair, and the small alien sat down, folding its long fingers together. "The Council is not united in this decision," Ketsara said. "Many species, including my own, believe punishing Earth is a mistake. Your species is young, yes, but young does not mean weak, and it certainly does not mean wrong. The Dravith and their allies have pushed hard for this action, because they fear what humanity might become if left unchecked. They have seen young species rise quickly before, species that challenge the old order. They do not wish to see it happen again. So this isn't really about a destroyed scout ship," Elena said. "It never was," Ketsara said. "The scout ship was a convenient excuse. The Dravith wanted a reason to test your species, to see if you would break under pressure like so many others have. If Earth kneels, they will use it as proof that all young species must eventually submit to the old powers. If Earth resists and loses, they will use it as a warning to any other species that might dream of standing tall." "And if Earth resists and wins?" Elena asked. Ketsara's large dark eyes studied her for a long moment. "Then the entire order of the galaxy may change. Species who have quietly resented Council rule for centuries may find new courage. That is precisely what the Dravith fear most." Elena leaned forward. "How large is the fleet they're sending?" 12 battle cruisers, Ketsara said, escorted by 40 support vessels. "It is not the Dravith's full strength, but it is more than enough to devastate an unprepared world. They do not expect a real fight, Ambassador. They expect a demonstration, a show of force large enough to frighten your people into submission before a single shot needs to be fired in true anger." Elena felt a cold weight settle in her chest. 12 battle cruisers. She thought of the images she had seen of Dravith warships, kilometers long, bristling with weapons that could level cities. Even with the Resolute and her sister ships racing home, humanity's entire fleet was smaller than what the Council was sending as merely a warning. "Why are you telling me this?" Elena asked. "Because I believe every species deserves the chance to choose its own fate," Ketsara said, "and because I do not believe punishment should be dressed up as justice. If your people intend to resist, they deserve every scrap of information that might help them survive. I cannot fight your battle for you, Ambassador, but I can make sure you do not walk into it blind." Elena thanked the small alien, and Ketsara slipped quietly out of the room, leaving Elena alone with the knowledge of what was coming. She activated her personal communicator, encrypted and shielded from Council monitoring by technology Earth's engineers had smuggled into her equipment before she left, and sent an urgent message back to Earth, detailing everything Ketsara had told her. Aboard the Resolute, Admiral Okafor received Elena's message as his ship tore through the void toward home. He read it twice, his expression darkening with each line. 12 battle cruisers, he said quietly. 40 support vessels. That's a significant force, Admiral, said his second-in-command, Captain Diane Okonkwo, a sharp, steady officer who had fought in every major exercise Earth's fleet had run over the past decade. Even with the full Terran fleet gathered, we'll be outnumbered and outgunned in raw firepower. I know, Okafor said, but they're not expecting a fight. They're expecting a surrender. He pulled up the tactical display, studying the projected arrival point of the alien fleet relative to Earth's defenses. We have advantages they don't know about. Our ships are faster. Our weapons hit differently than anything they've faced, and we have something they've never had to consider before. What's that, Admiral? Okonkwo asked. A homeworld full of people who have spent 10 years training for exactly this moment, Okafor said. Every soldier, every engineer, every scientist on Earth has been preparing for first contact turning hostile. The Dravith think they're facing a young, frightened species that will fold the moment real power shows up. They don't understand that we've been afraid since the very first day, and fear is exactly what drove us to build everything we have. He turned to the crew. Signal every Terran vessel. All fleets converge on Earth orbit. Full readiness. We are not surrendering our world without giving them the fight of their lives. The bridge crew responded with quiet, determined nods. There was no cheering, no bravado. Just the steady resolve of people who understood exactly what was at stake and had already decided what they were willing to do about it. Back on Earth, in cities and towns across the planet, ordinary people went about their lives largely unaware of how close their world stood to disaster. Governments had been careful to avoid full public panic, releasing only vague statements about ongoing diplomatic negotiations with the Galactic Council. But among the scientists, soldiers, and leaders who understood the truth, a quiet, grim determination had settled in. In a research facility outside Geneva, Dr. Amara Singh worked through the night with her team, making final adjustments to the weapons systems that would be installed on every ship in Earth's defense fleet. She had not slept in over 30 hours, but sleep felt impossible with an alien fleet bearing down on her homeworld. The Council thinks strength means size, she muttered to herself, tightening a final connection on a weapons module. They think old means invincible. They've never had to fight someone who had nothing to lose and everything to prove. She looked up at the star charts on the wall of her lab, at the small blue marker representing Earth, so small and fragile against the vast dark map of a galaxy filled with species far older and far more powerful than her own. Let them come, she said quietly. Let's see what happens when the galaxy finally meets humanity on our own terms. Above her, in the black expanse of space, the Terran fleet began to gather in Earth's orbit, ship by ship, a small but determined force preparing to make its stand. And somewhere beyond the edge of the solar system, 12 massive Dravith battle cruisers cut through the darkness, carrying with them the full weight of the Council's judgment, utterly unaware of just how wrong their assumptions about humanity truly were. The countdown to first contact's true test had begun. The Dravith fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system 3 days after the Council's ultimatum. 12 battle cruisers, each nearly 3 kilometers long, emerged in perfect formation, their dark hulls lit by the distant glow of the sun. 40 smaller support ships spread out around them, forming a wall of alien steel that stretched across the void like a slow-moving storm front. On the bridge of the lead cruiser, the Dravith fleet commander, a hardened warrior named Vorkesh, studied the approaching blue and green planet on his display, with something close to boredom. He had done this before, many times, against many young species. The pattern was always the same. A show of overwhelming force, a brief moment of resistance, usually pathetic and quickly crushed, then submission, and the quiet, orderly business of bringing another world under Council authority. Sensors show minimal defense fleet in orbit, reported his tactical officer, a smaller Dravith with darker plating, perhaps 20 vessels, small, unfamiliar configuration. As expected, Vorkesh said. Young species rarely have more than token defenses. Move the fleet into standard intimidation formation. Broadcast the Council's terms. Give them the chance to surrender, before we are forced to demonstrate the consequences of defiance. The great fleet advanced steadily toward Earth, broadcasting a message on every frequency human technology could receive. A deep, resonant alien voice speaking words that had been translated into every major human language by the ship's systems. People of Earth. This fleet acts under the authority of the Galactic Council. Your representative has refused the lawful judgment of the Council regarding your species' conduct. You are given one opportunity to submit peacefully. Power down your defense platforms. Recall your vessels to standby status. Prepare your leadership to formally accept Council authority. Failure to comply within 1 solar hour will be viewed as continued defiance, and appropriate consequences will follow. The message repeated over and over as the fleet closed the distance, a countdown ticking silently toward what Vorkesh fully expected to be another quiet, easy victory. He did not expect what happened next. Admiral Okafor stood on the bridge of the Resolute, now positioned at the heart of Earth's gathered defense fleet, a formation of 31 Terran warships arranged in a pattern that looked, to alien sensors, disorganized and amateurish. It was not disorganized, it was deliberate. They're broadcasting the same ultimatum on every channel, Lieutenant Voss reported, demanding full surrender within the hour. Do not respond, Okafor said calmly. Let them talk. Let them believe we're considering it. Admiral, Captain Okonkwo said quietly, the fleet is in position. All ships report weapons hot and ready. Just say the word. Okafor studied the tactical display, watching the massive Dravith cruisers advance in their slow, confident formation. 12 battle cruisers, each one larger than Earth's entire fleet combined. By every traditional measure of galactic warfare, this battle should have been over before it began. But Okafor had not built humanity's fleet to fight a traditional battle. Dr. Singh's weapon systems are fully installed and calibrated? Okafor asked. Confirmed, Admiral, replied the ship's chief engineer. Every vessel in the fleet is running the new targeting arrays and the phase disruption cannons. We've never used them in real combat, but simulations show a significant advantage against Dravith armor. Then we're about to find out if Dr. Singh's simulations were right, Okafor said. He turned to the wider fleet channel, his voice steady and calm, as it reached every ship under his command. This is Admiral Okafor. In a few minutes, an alien fleet will demand our surrender. We are not going to give it to them. Every one of you has trained for this moment, even if none of us truly believed it would come. Remember your training. Remember why we built these ships. We are not fighting for glory today. We are fighting for the right to exist as we are, on our own terms, in a galaxy that has never once asked what we wanted. Hold your positions. Wait for my signal. And when the moment comes, show them exactly what humanity is capable of. A chorus of steady acknowledgments came back across the channel. No cheering, no bravado, just calm, focused readiness. The Dravith fleet's countdown reached its final minute. Aboard the lead cruiser, Vorkesh watched with growing irritation as the human fleet remained motionless, no response coming to his demands for surrender. Still no reply, his communications officer reported. Foolish, Vorkesh muttered. Prepare a demonstration strike. Target the unoccupied region of their largest orbital station. Nothing lethal. Simply enough to remind them what true power looks like. The lead cruiser's massive forward weapon began to charge, a slow, building glow of energy visible even from Earth's surface, where millions of people had finally been told the truth and now watched the sky in terrified silence. Admiral, Lieutenant Voss said urgently, the lead cruiser is charging a weapon. Target appears to be the Meridian Orbital Station, estimated 300 civilian personnel aboard. Okafor's jaw tightened. The Dravith intended to prove their power with a strike that would, even if not aimed to kill everyone aboard the station, almost certainly cause casualties among the workers still finishing evacuation procedures. We move now, Okafor said. Full fleet, engage defensive formation Delta. Priority 1, protect the Meridian Station, weapons free. The Terran fleet exploded into motion, ships that had appeared slow and disorganized, suddenly revealing their true purpose. They scattered in complex, rapid patterns, far faster than the lumbering Dravith cruisers could easily track, converging in a protective screen around the threatened station. Enemy vessels moving with unexpected speed, Vorkesh's tactical officer reported, a note of surprise entering his voice for the first time. Continue the charge, Vorkesh ordered, more out of stubbornness than wisdom. Fire on schedule. The lead cruiser's weapon released a massive beam of energy toward the Meridian station, a shot that would have devastated the structure and killed everyone still aboard. It never reached its target. 3 Terran vessels, moving in perfect coordination, intercepted the beam's path with a layered energy shield technology that Earth scientists had developed specifically to counter exactly this kind of alien weaponry. The beam splashed harmlessly against the shield, dissipating into a shower of harmless light. On the bridge of the lead cruiser, Vorkesh stared at his display in genuine shock. No young species had ever intercepted a Dravith capital weapon before. Not one. "Impossible," he said quietly. "Admiral," Voss called out, "shield held. Meridian station is secure. Casualties, 0. A brief, fierce cheer rippled through the Resolute's bridge before discipline reasserted itself. "They just tried to kill hundreds of civilians as a warning shot," Okafor said grimly. "Full fleet, weapons free. Target their support vessels first, disrupt their formation. Do not engage the battle cruisers directly until we've thinned their numbers. Dr. Singh's phase cannons. On my mark." The Terran fleet surged forward, breaking into smaller, agile groups that darted between the massive, slow-turning Dravith ships with a speed and precision the alien commanders had never encountered before. Human pilots, trained for a decade in simulations that assumed exactly this kind of desperate, outmatched fight, used every advantage their smaller ships possessed. The phase disruption cannons fired for the first time in real combat, weapons designed specifically after years of study to exploit a critical weakness in Dravith armor plating, a weakness the Dravith themselves did not know existed because no species had ever been desperate enough, or clever enough, to find it. Where traditional weapons splashed harmlessly against the thick alien hulls, the phase cannons found the seams, the weak points, tearing through armor that had never been breached in 1,000 years of galactic warfare. Support vessels began to fall, one after another, their shields overwhelmed by coordinated fire from Terran ships that seemed to be everywhere at once, striking and retreating before the larger Dravith cruisers could bring their heavier weapons to bear. "This is not possible," Vorkesh said, watching his formation crumble on the tactical display. "They are a young species. They should not fight like this." "Orders, Commander?" his tactical officer asked, urgency clear in his voice now. Vorkesh's confidence, built over centuries of easy victories against species who had always eventually knelt, began to crack for the first time in his long career. "Bring the battle cruisers forward," he ordered. "Full engagement. Show them what real power looks like." The 12 massive battle cruisers began to advance, their heavier weapons finally charging for a direct assault on the Terran fleet's core formation, where the Resolute held its position at the heart of Earth's defense. Admiral Okafor watched the alien cruisers close in, 12 towering warships, each capable of devastating firepower, bearing down on his fleet with the full might of the Council behind them. "Admiral," Okonkwo said quietly, "this is the real fight now." Okafor nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on the approaching wall of alien steel. "Then let's show them exactly what we've been preparing for. All ships, converge on my position. It's time they learned what happens when they threaten humanity's home." The battle for Earth had truly begun. The 12 Dravith battle cruisers advanced like moving mountains, their heavy weapons finally charged and ready, closing the distance toward the heart of the Terran fleet. Admiral Okafor watched the tactical display with the calm focus of a man who had spent 10 years preparing for this exact moment, even if he had prayed it would never come. "Enemy cruisers entering primary weapons range in 30 seconds, Lieutenant Voss reported. "All ships, defensive formation Gamma," Okafor ordered. "Spread the fleet. Do not let them get a clean shot at more than one ship at a time." The Terran vessels broke into smaller clusters, weaving between each other in patterns that looked chaotic but were, in truth, carefully rehearsed maneuvers, designed specifically to counter the kind of massed firepower a battlecruiser could bring to bear. Where the Dravith expected their enemies to clump together in traditional battle lines, easy targets for their devastating broadside weapons, the human fleet refused to give them that satisfaction. The lead Dravith cruiser fired first, a massive beam of destructive energy, lancing out toward the nearest Terran ship. The human vessel, warned by its sensors a fraction of a second before the shot, rolled hard and dove beneath the beam's path, the energy tearing harmlessly through empty space where the ship had been only moments before. Direct hit missed, Vorkesh's tactical officer reported, disbelief creeping into his voice. Target evaded. Recalculate firing solutions, Vorkesh snapped. They cannot keep dodging forever. But dodge they did, again and again, as the battle cruisers unleashed volley after volley of devastating firepower, only to watch their shots miss or glance harmlessly off shields that human engineers had spent a decade perfecting specifically to survive exactly this kind of assault. The Terran ships were smaller, yes, and individually far weaker than the towering Dravith cruisers, but they were fast, agile, and coordinated in ways the Dravith fleet, built around centuries of predictable, straightforward tactics, simply could not match. Dr. Singh's phase cannons concentrate fire on Cruiser 7, Okafor ordered, watching as 3 Terran vessels broke off to focus their weapons on a single target. Hit the same section repeatedly. Find the weak point and open it up. The 3 human ships darted around the massive cruiser, firing in precise, coordinated bursts that struck the same section of armor over and over, each hit weakening the plating a little further, until, finally, the phase disruption technology found what it was looking for. A section of the cruiser's hull tore open in a burst of escaping atmosphere and fire, and the great ship's shields flickered and failed. Cruiser 7 is losing power, Vorkesh's tactical officer reported, alarm clear in his voice now. Their shields are down across 2/3 of the hull. Vorkesh stared at the display, his centuries of confident, easy victories crumbling before his eyes. No young species should have been able to do this. No young species had ever done this. Pull Cruiser 7 back, he ordered. Reinforce with the support fleet. But the support fleet had already been decimated in the opening minutes of the battle. Dozens of smaller vessels destroyed or disabled by the swift, coordinated strikes of the Terran ships. What remained scrambled to protect the wounded cruiser, but the human fleet pressed its advantage, refusing to give the Dravith forces a single moment to regroup. On Earth, in cities across the planet, people gathered around screens, watching footage relayed from orbital cameras as the battle raged above their world. What had begun as a quiet, controlled release of information from the Terran Defense Council had turned into a moment the entire species would remember forever. Billions of people watched as small, agile human ships danced between towering alien war machines, striking with a precision and courage that seemed impossible against such overwhelming odds. In Geneva, Dr. Amara Singh stood in her lab, eyes fixed on the live tactical feed, watching her phase disruption cannons tear through Dravith armor that had never before been breached. Tears streamed down her face, exhaustion and hope and fear all tangled together after 10 years of relentless work finally being tested in the fire of real combat. "Come on," she whispered. "Come on, hold together just a little longer." The battle raged for nearly 2 hours, an eternity in the fast-paced world of galactic warfare. 2 more Dravith cruisers fell to concentrated Terran fire, their crews forced to evacuate as the massive ships lost power and drifted, dark and broken, at the edge of the battle. The Terran fleet had lost ships too. 5 vessels destroyed, and several more badly damaged. Brave crews, who had given everything to defend their world. But the balance of the fight had shifted in a way no one in the Council had ever imagined possible. Vorkesh stood on his bridge, watching his once proud fleet crumble around him. 9 battle cruisers remained, along with a handful of surviving support vessels, but the confidence that had carried him through centuries of easy victories had been shattered entirely. "Commander," his tactical officer said quietly, "we are losing this engagement." Vorkesh's hands tightened into fists. Retreat was almost unthinkable for a Dravith commander, a mark of shame that would follow him for the rest of his long life. But continuing to fight against an enemy who had already proven capable of tearing apart his fleet's supposedly invincible armor, risked losing everything, including his own life and the lives of every soldier under his command. Before he could give the order either way, a new signal arrived on his display, a priority transmission from the Council's central command. "Commander Vorkesh," came the voice of the Council's speaker, tense and clipped in a way Vorkesh had never heard before. "You are ordered to withdraw immediately. Full retreat. Return to Council space for debriefing." "Speaker," Vorkesh said, struggling to keep his voice steady, "we can still press the attack, if given reinforcements." "You will withdraw," the speaker said firmly. "The Council has received urgent reports from observers across a dozen systems," News of this battle is already spreading. Every species under Council authority is watching what happens here, Commander. If Earth's defense fleet destroys the entirety of your force, the consequences will extend far beyond this single battle. Withdraw. Now. Vorkesh stared at the tactical display, at the wreckage of 3 battle cruisers drifting in the dark, at the stubborn, relentless human ships still weaving between his remaining vessels, refusing to break, refusing to surrender, refusing to be the easy, quiet victory he had expected when he first arrived at the edge of this system. All remaining ships, he said finally, the words bitter in his mouth, prepare for immediate withdrawal, full retreat to Council space. On the bridge of the Resolute, Lieutenant Voss's voice rang out with something close to disbelief. Admiral, enemy fleet is breaking off. They're retreating. All remaining Dravith vessels are jumping to faster-than-light travel. A silence fell over the bridge, the kind of silence that comes in the space between disbelief and understanding. Confirm that, Lieutenant, Okafor said quietly. Confirmed, Admiral, Voss said. The Dravith fleet is withdrawing. They're leaving the system. The bridge erupted, finally, into genuine celebration, officers embracing each other, relief and disbelief and joy, all crashing together, after 2 hours of the most intense combat any of them had ever experienced. Admiral Okafor allowed himself a long, slow breath, watching the tactical display, as the last Dravith ships vanished from Earth's system, leaving behind only the wreckage of their broken cruisers and the shattered remains of their confidence. Admiral, Captain Okonkwo said, her voice thick with emotion. We actually held. Okafor nodded slowly, looking out at the stars beyond the viewport, at the small blue and green planet turning quietly below them, safe for now, its people watching in stunned, grateful silence, as the alien fleet that had come to demand their submission fled instead into the dark. We held, he agreed quietly. But this isn't over. The Council just learned something today they never expected to learn, and I don't think they're going to forget it quickly. He turned to Lieutenant Voss. Send word to Ambassador Cho. Tell her the fleet has been repelled, Earth stands, and humanity is ready to talk. On our own terms this time. As the words left his mouth, far across the galaxy, in the great hall where Elena Cho still waited under careful watch, news of the battle's outcome was already spreading through the Council chambers, whispered from delegate to delegate, species to species, a single message rippling outward across 1,000 worlds. The young species from the small blue world had not knelt, and for the first time in longer than most species could remember, the old powers of the galaxy found themselves forced to wonder what else humanity might be capable of. News of the battle spread across the galaxy faster than any official Council announcement could contain it. Traders whispered about it in distant space stations. Small species who had lived for centuries under the shadow of the old powers passed the story along their own private channels, half in disbelief, half in something that felt dangerously close to hope. A young species, barely a decade into galactic society, had faced down 12 Dravith battlecruisers and forced them into retreat. It was the kind of story that changed how an entire galaxy thought about power. In the Great Hall of the Galactic Council, the mood was tense in a way Elena Cho had not felt since her arrival. Delegates who had once looked at her with pity or indifference now watched her with something closer to caution, even respect. The Dravith section of the chamber sat unusually quiet, their usual confidence visibly shaken. The speaker rose to address the assembly, and Elena noted that his voice, when it came, carried none of the icy certainty it had held during their first meeting. Ambassador Cho, the speaker said, the Council has reviewed the events at the Sol system. The engagement resulted in significant losses for the deployed fleet, and the political consequences have been considerable. Elena kept her expression calm, though inside she felt something like quiet triumph. Humanity did not seek this conflict, speaker. We were given an ultimatum, and when that ultimatum turned into an armed attack on our homeworld, we defended ourselves. Nothing more. Murmurs spread through the chamber, and Elena noticed something new in them, a shift she had not expected. Where before the murmurs had carried mockery, now they carried something closer to genuine interest. A new voice spoke up from one of the outer rings, a delegate from a smaller species Elena did not immediately recognize. The Council should ask itself why a young species, given only 10 years to prepare, was able to repel a force that has subdued a dozen worlds before it, without difficulty. Perhaps the lesson here is not about Earth's arrogance, but about assumptions this council has held for far too long. More voices joined in. Delegates from smaller, less powerful species who had quietly resented the dominance of the Dravith and their allies for generations. Elena listened as the chamber, usually so orderly and controlled, dissolved into genuine heated debate for the first time she had witnessed since her arrival. The speaker raised a hand, calling for order, and slowly the chamber quieted. The council acknowledges, the speaker said, each word coming with obvious difficulty, that the demand for Earth's unconditional submission was premature. Given the circumstances of the original incident, and given Earth's demonstrated capability to defend itself, the Council proposes a revised path forward. Formal membership negotiations, conducted as equals, without demands of disarmament or acts of submission. Elena felt a quiet, fierce satisfaction settle over her. This was what she had hoped for from the very beginning. Not conquest, not domination, simply the chance for humanity to stand as an equal among the galaxy's many species. Humanity is willing to negotiate in good faith, Elena said. We do not seek conflict with the Council or any of its member species. We seek only the right to defend our home, and the respect due to any species willing to fight for its survival. The speaker inclined his head. A gesture Elena had learned, through months of study, was as close to genuine respect as the proud ancient Dravith ever showed to anyone. Then let formal negotiations begin, the speaker said, on equal terms, as you have requested. 6 months later, Admiral James Okafor stood once again on the bridge of the Resolute, now docked at humanity's newly constructed orbital shipyard, a massive facility built in the aftermath of the battle to expand and strengthen Earth's fleet even further. Around him, engineers and workers moved with quiet purpose, preparing the ship for a very different kind of mission than the desperate defense it had once been built for. Ambassador Elena Cho had returned to Earth as a hero, her calm defiance in the face of the Council's demands remembered across the planet as the moment humanity had refused to be pushed aside. She had continued her work, now leading formal negotiations that had, over the following months, established Earth's place in galactic society, not as a lesser world forced into submission, but as a respected member of a growing coalition of smaller species who had found new courage in humanity's example. Okafor watched as a shuttle approached the Resolute, carrying Elena for a scheduled meeting before her return to the Council for the final signing of Earth's formal membership agreement. When she stepped aboard the bridge, she looked different from the exhausted, frightened woman who had first been summoned before the Council, her posture straighter, her eyes carrying a quiet confidence that had not been there before. "Ambassador," Okafor said, greeting her with a respectful nod. "Admiral," Elena replied, a small smile crossing her face. "I hear congratulations are in order. The shipyard looks impressive." "We're not taking any more chances," Okafor said. "The Council may have backed down, but there are still plenty of species out there who might see Earth as an easy target. We intend to make sure no one makes that mistake again." Elena walked to the viewport, looking out at Earth turning slowly below them, blue and green and achingly beautiful against the black of space. "Do you think the Dravith will try again someday?" Okafor considered the question carefully. "Maybe. Old powers don't like being reminded that they're not as invincible as they believed, but I think they've learned something important about us. We don't back down easily, and we don't forget who our friends are." Elena nodded slowly. The smaller species have been reaching out more and more since the battle. Trade agreements, technology sharing, even a few requests for mutual defense pacts. It seems humanity has become something of an inspiration to species who've spent centuries living under the shadow of powers like the Dravith. "Good," Okafor said. "We could use the friends. And honestly, I think we owe it to them. If our fight showed other species they don't have to accept old assumptions about their own weakness, then something good came out of all of this, beyond just Earth's survival." Elena looked at him, a thoughtful expression crossing her face. "Do you ever think about how close it came? If the Council had sent their full fleet, if we hadn't finished the phase cannons in time, if any one of 100 things had gone differently." "Every day," Okafor admitted quietly, "but we didn't fail. We were ready, because for 10 years, every single person on this planet worked as hard as they possibly could. Driven by fear, yes, but also by hope. Hope that we could build something strong enough to protect what mattered. That's not luck, Ambassador. That's what happens when an entire species refuses to accept being told it doesn't matter. Elena smiled, watching the stars beyond the viewport, thinking of the long road that had brought humanity from a single destroyed scout ship to this moment, standing as equals before a galaxy that had once demanded nothing less than complete submission. "The Council still doesn't fully understand us," she said. "I don't think they ever will." "Good," Okafor said, a small, satisfied smile crossing his face. "Let them wonder. Humanity's just getting started." Below them, Earth continued its slow, steady turn, unaware of just how close it had come to a very different fate, protected now by a fleet built from desperation and determination, and by the quiet, unbreakable will of a species that had refused, when the moment came, to kneel. The galaxy had learned an important lesson that day above Earth. Old power was not the only kind of power that mattered. Sometimes, the fiercest strength came from those who had the least to begin with, and everything in the world left to fight for. Humanity had answered the Council's demand in the only way it truly could, not with submission, but with a warship and the unbreakable resolve of an entire species standing behind it. The end.